name is Rav Dhaliwell, and I am one of the managers in what we call Yammer's customer engagement team. And what our team does is we work with organizations from all around the world to help them drive value out of social tools, right? And today I'd like to talk about this theme of disruption. And I think it's, and how we can use social tools to kind of embrace disruption and generate value from it. And I think this is particularly pertinent because Europe is undergoing a period of unprecedented disruption, economically, socially, politically. And there's a phrase that I like, I think it's American in origin, which says there are only two constants in life, and those constants are death and taxes. And I think there's two others that can be added to that. And I think the first one is that we can't predict the future. And the second one is that change is inevitable. Now, the challenge is that most organizations aren't built for change. What they're built for is to be stable, to be consistent, and to be as efficient as possible. Now, to understand why that is the case, we need to take a quick look back in history. So, it was really the Industrial Revolution. This is the first time where we as a culture, as a society, learned to build products and services on an absolutely massive scale. And so in order to do that at scale, we needed structure, we needed repeatable, predictable processes, and we needed a giant bureaucracy of management to manage it all. And this legacy of prioritizing efficiency made total sense if you could predict what you were going to do in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Now, the challenge of focusing and building a structure based on efficiency is that it makes it very, very difficult to innovate and change. And that's the challenge that we've been left with today. And the legacy of this is this. I'm sure you're all familiar. It's the organizational chart. And inevitably, the silos that the organizational chart creates. Now, the problem with the org chart is it doesn't really reflect how work is done. Work is done by teams of people across an organization, cross-functionally, and increasingly from outside our organization as well now. But organizations are actually just, organizational charts, I should say, are just one silo in an organization, because organizations are now increasingly complex networks of different things. They're networks of different languages. They're networks of geographical location. Increasingly, network organizations are global. And they're a network of different systems used to create and store content. All of these are silos. They all are structures that prevent us from dealing with disruptive changes. Now, a very good example from the world of business is Blockbuster. So I'm going to show my age here. Blockbuster are the people who pioneered renting movies. So you could go to a Blockbuster store and hire a video cassette and who remembers video cassettes? Probably, yeah. Okay, thank you. Before the age of DVD. Now, Blockbuster listed itself on the stock market in 1999. It was valued at $4.8 billion. Huge amount of money. Now, that same year, a gentleman called Reed Hastings, who was really sick of paying Blockbuster late video fees, he had this idea of distributing movies via this thing called the internet and founded this little company called Netflix, right? Now, fast forward to 2010, Blockbuster files for bankruptcy worth only $24 million, right? And that's not a very long time. So why did this happen? It's because Blockbuster failed to adapt to the changing needs of its customers, and they weren't structured in a way that would allow them to change quickly. Another good example is a departmental one. It's the IT department. Do we have any people from IT in today? Good, we can all talk freely. So the value of an IT department is to help an organization use technology to be a better organization, right? And the way they've done this is by building servers and supporting desktops and building intranets, which I'm sure a lot of you have been involved in, and building networks. Now, cloud computing came along a few years ago, about 10 years ago, and many of these IT departments missed the advantage of it because they said, no, our job is actually to maintain servers and infrastructure. And they didn't adapt. And the reason they didn't adapt, and this is a very common problem in organizations, is they confused what they do with the value of what they actually provide. That's a key issue. If you remember one thing today, it's don't confuse what you do with the value that you actually provide. Now, I can tell you many stories about organizations that have been disrupted. You've all got smartphones in here. Just think about the mobile phone landscape 5 years ago. Totally different from what it was today. One or two players have disrupted that whole industry. Now, the challenge here is change is and disruption is happening so often that companies in the Fortune 500, they're failing at a rate of 8% a year. So interestingly, companies who are in the, only 50% of the companies who are in the Fortune 500 in 1995 are still there. And this rate of change is, and this rate of failure is accelerating. And I think the reason it's accelerating is because we are much more connected now in our lives than we have ever been before. So our behavior and our expectations change dramatically when we learn new information. And the pace at which we're learning new information is really, really quick. So not so long ago, if you like, for example, in my father's generation, you could go through your entire working career, 30, 40, 50 years, and never suffer any kind of disruption. But when disruption's happening every 10 years, like in the case of Blockbuster, or 5 years, or even yearly, then we must actually accept that disruption and disruptive change is a way of life. So what is disruption? I've talked about it for about 5 minutes. What is it? Well, I think it's simply when somebody else figures out how to deliver the value that you deliver, but just better than you, right? It's not about doing what you do better. It's about servicing the need of your customers in a better and different way. And your customers could be internal. They could be your own employees if you're in internal comms, for example. So we talked a little bit about like the value of IT. So the value of IT is not in building infrastructure. It's actually helping your organization use technology better. The value of marketing is not to think up cool slogans. It's to generate sales for leads for sales, right? So the value of communications is not to craft the perfectly crafted message. It's actually to make sure your employees and your customers are informed and aligned and empowered so they are more productive. Now, what has this got to do with social tools? Social tools like Yammer. Well, social tools like Yammer make open communication much easier, right? They help us recognize opportunities where things aren't going right or where we can innovate, and they help us adapt more easily. And we've been talking about disruption, and I was actually very fortunate enough to be at an event a few weeks ago here in Brussels with the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Šefčovič. And he spoke about these challenges because he said, in order to solve Europe's challenges, we can't keep working in the way that we've been working. We can't be working in a siloed departmental mentality. We need to bring together task forces to solve Europe's problems. So if you think about Cyprus and the banking crisis in Cyprus, that needs people from public administration, policy experts, finance experts, maybe people from the outside like the IMF. We need to bring them together very quickly and do a couple of key things to solve those problems. And what I'm going to do is talk to you about these sort of 4 areas, and just from my personal experience, examples of I've seen of how people have very successfully used social tools to deal with disruption. So as an organization, once you've identified, well, look, actually, this is the value you provide. So like at Yammer, our value is not our product. It's not. And that sounds very strange to say, but it's not. Our value is helping organizations be more open and helping employees to get more connected, right? So once you, as an organization, have come to consensus about what your value is, you must make sure everybody is aligned to that goal. Everyone has to be moving in the same direction. And because if you're aligned on common goals, then you can adapt much, much easier because you're all focused on the same objective. Now, RHP, the Richmond Housing Partnership, is an organization I've done a lot of work with. They manage thousands of properties throughout London. And their core value as an organization is customer service. And they implement this core value through a process called personal promises, or a program. And the personal promises program is that every employee should point out when there's something that is affecting customer service, right? And they use their, in this case, Yammer network, to post the issues that they see that are affecting their customers, and to, as a group, as an organization, they're about 150 people, come to a consensus on what the solution is. Now, what this does is it keeps everyone in the organization aligned to what their core value is. And that's very, very important, because every employee is now then made responsible for upholding that core value. Now, once we're aligned about what we do and what our value is, we need to organize. Now, it's kind of human nature, it's our instinct to organize around what we do, around the processes we do for our work or the products that we produce. But what we really need to do is organize around the value that we provide. That's really what we want to do. Because what we do in terms of processes, that's inevitably going to change. And if we're only focused on that and we fail to recognize that that's going to change, the things we do today to make ourselves successful are not necessarily going to be the things that make us successful tomorrow. So here's a good example of this. So We've done a lot of work with Aviva Insurance. They're one of the UK's biggest insurance companies. They're actually one of the world's biggest insurance companies. And they're using social tools to self-organize in communications around delivering large events. So they recently did their annual leadership summit. It involved 250 global executives, their events team, outside suppliers, vendors, speakers. They brought them all together on their social network, which was, in this case, Yammer. And they not only organized the event in record time, it provided people who were coming to the event and who couldn't be at the event a mechanism to have visibility of what was going on, ask questions, and continue the discussion after the event. So they organized in a way that made sense for them, bringing people from all different disciplines together to produce this thing of value, which was their event. So we talked about how to organize and how to align on value, and we want to really stop defining our jobs in terms of those products and processes and services and define them around value. And so what we need to do then is let our employees feel empowered enough to innovate on the work that they do. This is not about letting them do whatever they want. It's about giving them the room to innovate within the job that they already have. And this is actually very, very key, because if they can adapt, they're going to find better ways to provide value. So a really good example is, I'm sure you're all familiar with Deloitte. Deloitte is one of the world's largest professional services firms. Their board in Australia, they made a decision in the board level that would change some HR policy, very minor change. They didn't expect it to be any issue. Anyway, 2 days later, the CEO, every 2 days, he spends 10 minutes looking at what's going on Yammer, sees that there is this massive conversation involving like 150 people about why this change will not work, why it is a really bad idea. There were some quite vocal thoughts about some of the people who made the decision. But most importantly, the staff are offering their advice about how this could be remedied, how this policy could actually work. Now, in this instance, the CEO read this and he responded and he said, guys, we didn't realize this would be such an issue. I'm going to get the COO to take a look at this. We'll be back to you by the end of the week, right? The COO, he read through the conversation. There were two people who had the most vocal opposition and the best ideas to implement this. He met them both for a coffee. They were both first-year graduates. End of that week, they changed the policy. The CEO avoided a crisis. So what their social network allowed them to do was to empower employees to come forward with ideas about how to make things better. And it also gave visibility to senior management about what the impact of their changes are, and they averted a crisis that way. So the final thing that we want to do, and we want to use our social tools for, is to create a culture of constant improvement. I'm sure you're all familiar with Kaizen, the Japanese principle of constant improvement, first pioneered by Toyota in the 1970s. And this is a process where every employee is encouraged to point out where there are inefficiencies or where things need to be corrected. Now, a company that I've done a lot of work with is Circle Healthcare in the UK. They are a private organisation. They build and run hospitals. They have now taken over a few national health hospitals, and they've taken this Kaizen principle to a program they call Stop the Line. And this means that every employee is empowered to stop any process, whether that be an executive decision or, in the case a few weeks ago, an operation, where a nurse actually stopped an operation because she spotted there was a problem with the anesthesia. And it goes back to their core principle of serving their patients. Now, they do this publicly on their Yammer network and post what they have stopped, and then have a discussion as an organization around how they can prevent this from happening. So they are empowered to adapt. So they can actually constantly improve the organization and adapt to meet any challenges. So I think the thing about constant improvement is it's okay to openly talk about mistakes, and you need a platform with which to do that and to do it easily. And what social tools like Yammer allow you to do is to have this open platform that everybody can contribute to. Now, people often interpret the need to change as some indication of failure, right? That we've actually failed and that's why we need to change. But what we know, and what I spoke about before, is that change is constant. And you have to be able to change and change quickly in order to survive and to keep relevant. So the point, again, here from Henry Ford is, you just can't keep doing the same things that you do, because if you do, you'll just get the same result. So what social tools allow us to do is they make it easier to communicate across these silos, right? And to be more open, because what we want to do is turn this very rigid structure into something like this, right? Now, that might be terrifying for a lot of you. I hope it isn't. But if we can create this kind of structure, what we can do is adapt very quickly. We can capitalize on disruption. and we can connect every employee at every level, right? And so my call to action for you guys as communicators is what you want to do is you want to be the disruption. That's what you should be, right? For the first time ever, you all in this room, every single one of you, has access to tools, pretty much, at no cost, that connects every employee at every level on any device. And this is unprecedented. And I would say that what you want to do is you want to use these tools to do three things. You want to use these tools to ask your staff, what value do we provide as an organization, right? What are our customers trying to accomplish? And how can we innovate to help them get more value? Thank you. Thanks.